Okay, some other elements, and we're going to get into some real good examples here in a few minutes, but one thing you want to think about is how fast does my site load? Does it load fast enough on a cell phone or a iPad versus a desktop? Most of us are spoiled and we have fairly high-speed connections, whether at home or at the office. A lot of us now are accessing the web more and more with our mobile devices. We need to keep that in mind as we're designing sites. And does my site load fast on whatever platform I'm looking at? Google is kind enough to include this in both Google Analytics as one of the default reports, and you can also go to the pagespeed.googlelabs.com and run any page of your site through that, and it'll give you a whole list of suggestions of what you've done well, what you can improve, what you must improve. And I'll look at it on a desktop and a mobile point of view. It's an incredibly useful tool, and Google gives it to us for free. Now, why is Google doing that? Because Google wants to have the sites that they serve up in the search results to be a good user experience, because if Google says this is the best site and they drive you to it and it's a bad user experience, what is that saying about Google's judgment? So Google is doing this completely self-serving, but we accept that as part of Google's DNA. Now, some other things you want to look at: adequate text to background contrast. Now, Carlos, who's the Beasley art director and WordPress maven back there, sent me a brand new template for our PowerPoint presentation. And the first thing I did when I looked at it was saying, will people be able to read this from across the room? And as you can see, the answer is yes. And so we have dark background, light text, dark text, light background. The bullets are still readable. They're a little different color, but it's very contrasty. Contrasty being a technical term here. It's easy to read. I can read this from up close. I can read it from all the way and back. Now, there are a few things on here I changed, but part of it is first time we imported anything into the template. And I am really pleased with this. It's a very clean template. The contrast is great. Our font spacing, easy to read. It's not all crunched together. And that's just with a presentation on a flat screen, completely static. The same holds true for a website. And instead of thinking, okay, Carlos and Tom are 25 feet away in the back of the room, can they read it? I'm thinking, Rocco is 2 feet away from his screen. Can he read it on his screen? I'm a foot away from my screen on my smartphone. Can I read it on my smartphone? So it's not just about where it is. It's about the environment it's being read in. Now, Flash and other kind of shiny bells and whistles can be incredibly helpful, but they can also be incredibly distracting. Use them to draw emphasis, but don't do the entire site in bells and whistles. If you guys remember in the Pixar movie The Incredibles, soon everybody will have superpowers and then nobody will be special. The quote from the villain, Sinestro, as I show my fanboy heritage. So use the Flash, use the bells and whistles, but use them appropriately. And Flash is one sort of bell and whistles. There's also HTML5 that does a lot of what Flash does and more. Videos, dancing bears, you name it. Use them to draw attention to what you want, but don't go crazy with them. Images, and this circles back to target. If you're going to take time to put images on your site, and possibly even go out and hire a photographer and an art director to come up with these images, why aren't you going to take time to put text around those images and in the alt tag, so if the image doesn't load, you can at least say, this is a hero shot of the Epson 5640 projector. Those alt tags make it much more usable if something breaks, the image doesn't load, or if you're doing a text-to-speech reader for somebody who's visually impaired. Having a page not found page, a custom 404 page, they'll come up and say, we're sorry you can't find your page, here are some suggestions on others. And then going back to the viewport, the difference between browser size and screen resolution. So I take my laptop home, I plug it into this docking station, and I have the, as my wife would say, the big monitor, fill in the blank, and it's huge. And when I open up my browser, and I have a little window here, and then I have spreadsheets, and then I have email, lots of different windows, but the website's existing in the browser window. It's not going to be the 32-inch diagonal screen size. It's going to be probably 2400 by 2400 pixels. So think browser size versus raw screen size. Okay, getting into some details. This is a snapshot from the page speed, and I threw in CNET. And I said, okay, here are your high priority recommendations, medium priority, low priority. And there are some things: enable compression of the site, leverage browser caching. A lot of this gets into some technical details, but it's very easy, clear to understand. You can give this list to your developer and work with them and say, okay, here's how we can improve it. And they'll go, okay, yeah, but why do I care? And you'll say, so more people can see our page. More people can interact with the page, enjoy the page, get a better feel for what's there. Yeah, it's cool to do the page so it loads as fast as it can, but that's not the goal. The goal is to make it more usable. Okay, this is one of the eyeball bleeders. Who wants to tell me what's wrong with this page? Yeah, that's a better question. So, the title here, not contrasty. Kind of funky flag image woven into it. And then we have everything's crunched together. There's not a lot of visible white space. We have very violently contrasting section backgrounds, reds and blues. Now, it makes sense. This is a political site, so the red state, blue state idea, not a bad metaphor, but this is a metaphor on acid. Yellow text on red background. There's no clean visual lines here. And this site's still around, and they're still updating it. So somebody's actually spending time every week to post something new on this site. And obviously there's some good content there because people are still reading it. But, ow. This is just, there's, the only thing I like about this site, and like might be a strong word here, is you have a very clear Democratic news and Republican news. Very clear, right there. That's the only piece of clarity on this whole thing. Everything else, ow, my eyeballs hurt. I've been using this slide now for 4 or 5 years, and it still kind of gives me the heebies. Well, yeah. So having a good, solid requirements document on what you want on the site is an excellent place to start. But you need to get buy-in from your development team and buy-in from your art team. And this gets beyond usability into political sensibilities. You need to give them a reason why. Generally the best approach I've had with developers is you're taking the time to build this. Number one, you want to build it right so you don't have to come back and touch it again and not add more work. And number two, why are we building it? Because we want people to use it. And if this or that element is missing, it makes it harder to use. And odds are somebody's going to get a wild hair and come back and have you touch it again. So why don't we sit down and plan it out right ahead of time, make it easier to use, make it more effective, and you'll look better at the end of the day because you were vital in developing this. The art directors are a little bit different beast. Carlos is back there giggling. You need to give them a good aesthetic reason why it's helpful. And so this is my sister-in-law I'm talking about here now. So this was she introduced me to my wife way back when I was living in New York. She was the art director at a publishing house and I was a sales guy. And she designed this big freestanding point of sale display for Halloween books. And graphically it was pretty interesting, but if you got more than 2 feet away you couldn't read anything. And she was jumping up and down, excited like a little girl, literally like a 6-year-old who just found the shiny object. And she's like, "Look at this! It's really cool." And she was showing me everything. I said, "Yeah, that is pretty cool. Let's look at it from back here." And I said, "Can you point out the headline from here?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, "It makes it a little less cool, doesn't it?" I gave her a reason. And it wasn't so much I have a better sense of taste than you do. It's like, we're doing this, we want it to look cool and graphically interesting, but it has to have the purpose. And so she made the headline very garish, and it worked because it was a Halloween book display for kids' books. But the idea was, I gave her a good reason to do it, and I kind of walked her down the path into the best solution. Now, we don't always have those opportunities. Sometimes it's more, you need to do this because I'm telling you, and you give them the reason without having a discussion. That's going to be much more of what's your relationship going into the game. But giving the person a good reason to make that change, to go outside of their kind of standard approach, is going to get you the most traction. That and a nice cup of coffee, or possibly a Star Trek figurine for the IT team. Okay. Same idea, accessibility. All kinds of issues with this site. Number one, where to start? You have issues with the contrast of the text here, kind of funky, disconnected backgrounds, multiple colors for the text. Then over here you have a Java applet that doesn't load. Lower down on the page you have a Flash applet that's not built well. So the site just as a whole isn't built so well. It's a little bit better on the white space, but it has this funky background here, and Lord save us from sites that are big on the graphic backgrounds. They work if they kind of slip up and down like a WordPress thing, but if you have one solid repeating graphic background, it detracts from the rest of the site. And people have argued with me on that, and that's a complete personal opinion, but I have some metrics to back it up. But again, we're running into issues with the readability. It's better, it's more wide open. There are some nice visual lines to read on, but still not really accessible. And if you tried to put this into a text-to-speech reader, there are some issues with how it reads the text. It would read across the section heads instead of up and down the section heads. Okay, here's our friends at Target. This is post-lawsuit. So, it's still a pretty image-heavy site, and that kind of fits with Target's brand name. So you have the lovely, happy people doing sit-ups in Target activewear, and then you have some hero shots down here, you have a video, you have some navigational elements. So this is the way it looks for people who don't need a text-to-speech reader. This is what happens when you're running it through a text-to-speech reader. So this actually says people doing sit-ups wearing Champion activewear. It's hard to read. And then we have hero information, we have product information, tagline, more product information, clicks, navigation, search up here. It doesn't look great to us right now, but if we had a text-to-speech reader, it goes through very clearly. It's well organized for the text-to-speech. You have alt text behind the images. All in all, it works pretty well. It's accessible, this versus that. What you do miss is the rotating banner here. You just get one image on that. But the rotating banner is very much a visual aid versus text. So that's Target. Okay. Earlier I was talking about whiz-bangs and interactivity and stuff like that. This is the Gap site. It's built heavily in something called Ajax. It's been tested within an inch of its life. They have web development budgets which make most of us grin with envy because it's where they make a lot of money. So this is how we see it, and this is how a text reader will see it. Again, easy navigation, very clean text, product description over here, more navigation here, chances to select your images, easy navigation up here. It's accessible. Now there are some other elements we're going to touch on later, but this is just talking about accessibility. It's accessible to anybody who comes to the window. Okay, whiz-bangs. This is a site that is developed in Flash. Here's the same site in HTML when somebody doesn't have Flash installed on their machine. Babycarriers.our Anano design took the time to create a site that's almost identical. They took some effort, they took some time, and look, it's the same thing. So that's a development team who said, we know everybody doesn't use Flash. We like Flash because it can do cool things, but we're also going to develop a site that's without the Flash and is still accessible to the world. Now, most people know this, but not everybody. Your iPhones, your iPads, anything on the iOS does not like Flash. And you can work around it, but it's not worth the effort. So if you want to develop something that's friendly on an iPhone or an iPad, don't put Flash on it. And a lot of Flash's functionality can now be done with HTML5. Question? It's really cheesy, but the baby lifts his head up and cries, and there's sound with it. I figured nobody needed that during the presentation. But with the Flash, the baby's head comes up and goes, ah. I'm not sure it's a net positive, but it's not dominating the thing, and there's some interactivity with the scale and some popovers or whatnot, but nothing that can't be done with HTML5. And honestly, a lot of Flash sites, it was great while it lasted, but Flash has become a secondary technology. It's no longer cutting edge, and you shouldn't be developing in it. But there are always going to be technologies that were once shiny and new and interesting and eventually get deprecated. So keep that in mind as you're developing and say, how can I make this work for the long term? Now, since it's a website, long term might be 2 years, but you want to think, I want my site to have some evergreen, some length. Okay. Accessibility. You've come to a page and you can't find it. It's a poor URL. This is the Apple one. It gives you a whole plethora of ways to go. And they will oftentimes include a couple of headlines when they're doing something like a product launch, the new iPhone 6S. They'll have a little headline saying, are you looking for information on the iPhone 6S? And they add it to their page not found. This is kind of off cycle for launches, but it's very usable. We have kind of a mini sitemap here. We have a search box up here. Search boxes are hugely important. We have their general navigation. We have support, very visible here. And again, all the product lines. It's very useful and friendly, and it says the page you can't. It says you can't find your page. Here are some ideas on where to go. It doesn't say page not found and imply you're out of luck. This gives you a next step. It's usable. It's accessible. Okay. Who is that smiling man? This is from our current Beasley Direct site, and it's a white paper on how to do your own email audit. Now, a couple of things I want to cover here. We have benefit statements, calls to action, areas to click that are very visually obvious. Okay, here's our headline, how to do your own email audit. That's an implied, you can do this yourself. You don't need to hire Beasley, although it would be nice if you did. We have some benefits here. Then we have a register now. We have a clickable link. We have another register now over here with Dave's smiling face. And then we have a third register now. We have a very easy to read bulleted list of benefits. We have a benefit statement here as a subhead, avoid common mistakes to keep your message from getting through. Now this is developed right now for a 1024 by 768 screen. This is what happens when you go down to an 800 by 600. We still have a call to action. We have a clickable link here. We have a benefit statement. We have the implied benefit statement here. We have some supporting facts. And that's on a little itty bitty screen. This is a non-responsive site. And so it doesn't look great on mobile. We've decided we want to fix that because mobile is important. And our new site is much more responsive and shifts how things appear. And we are really fairly excited about that. But it makes it user-friendly, and we still have these next steps here. The register now, the benefit statement, the easy places to go the next step. This page was designed to get somebody to download the white paper. That was the goal of the page. And by doing that, it establishes us as knowledge experts. That is the goal of this page, and it accomplishes it whether it's here or here.